Good evening. My name is Garen Dowd, and it's my great privilege to be able to host, chair, or moderate this discussion. And following conversations with the Institute and with Leos, it's been decided that perhaps in keeping with some of aspects of the film we've just seen, that a lot of the content, as it were, should come from the audience. So to this end, I'm just going to start with a few general questions about the film and then would open it up to contributions from you. So Leos, I suppose an obvious one to begin with is, can you tell us, for those who don't know the story of the genesis of this film, a little bit about how it arrived to us?
How did it?
How the process, the duration, and so on.
So it's not my project. It's a project from the musicians, the composers, Sparks. So they had two brothers from Los Angeles, and I guess I discovered their music when I was 13 or 14 years old. Especially two albums. They were called Propaganda and Indiscreet, which are albums I've listened to, mostly throughout my whole life. And I put a song of theirs from Indiscreet, I think, in my previous film, and they saw it and they contacted me with the idea of making a musical. Which is something I always wanted to do from the very beginning when I started making movies, probably because of my wish was to have a life in music, to have a life with music, as a musician or as a composer, singer. But music rejected me, so I went to cinema, and then they came with this gift. Let's do a musical, and about 20 demos, songs, which had the basic plot line, which is still in the film.
And one of the striking aspects of this film is its decisions with regard to certain filmmaking processes. And as I was looking at the film for the first time last night, I thought back to Holy Motors. And there you gave us an extraordinary sequence with green screen and motion capture technology in one of Monsieur Oscar's appointments at the motion capture factory, if it could be described as that. But moving from there to Annette, would you like to say a little to us about choices made in making this film with regard to the materiality of certain filmmaking processes?
Well, you start making films. I guess no filmmaker has not been a spectator before he's a filmmaker. You start making films because you've seen films and you've seen the power of cinema. Then I guess I started with silent films. I got to Paris when I was 17 years old, and I started to see silent films at the French Cinémathèque. So I didn't know anybody in Paris, and I was basically alone in the dark watching silent films. And then the feeling is, cinema was a recent invention, and very powerful invention. So how do you keep this power alive when, people get used to it and people, eat films now all over the place on the phones or computers or wherever. So it's every generation has to reinvent this primitive power. So you can use modern tools like digital and whatever. You can use old tools because cinema is basically the same. It's although it's now digital, it's the basic facts of cinema, of motion picture, of motion action is still the same. So I tend to go, because I was born in last century, I tend to go towards primitive cinema, but not to also accept new technologies. I'm interested in them. And in this film, there was that question of, how far do we go into digital imagery, 3D imagery, and I decided to kind of refuse that pretty much. That's why there's a puppet and not a 3D baby or a robotic animatronic baby, and other layers of, because when you make a musical, you have a big suspension of disbelief, so you can go further, you can, so yeah, that's how I decided to work with kind of going back to primitive cinema, but using at certain times modern technologies also.
And in that context, maybe just like to ask you a little bit more about the puppet. This particular puppet, I believe, is worth mentioning because, as I understand it, you spent 3 years trying to find the right puppet or the right manifestation of this puppet. And there's a particular, it seems to me, response that you might, I'm speculating here, might have been seeking from the search for the particular manifestation of this puppet. At one stage, you have Henry directly say to the camera and to the audience, "This is a baby. This is my baby." And I read an interview with the puppetry company you worked with, which seemed to confirm that their brief, or at least the one they established for themselves, was not to seek out, deliberately not to seek out an uncanny puppet, but one that would somehow be at home and not produce a cliched, we might say, sense of the uncanny, thinking, and that's not to diminish the history of cinema, which has produced many uncanny puppets and dolls, of course. But I wondered if I'm right in thinking that part of what you were looking for was a puppet that couldn't be described straightforwardly as uncanny, that this puppet must feel at home on the set, and equally the actors must feel at home with this puppet.
Yeah, so that's what's strange about this kind of situation, where I always think of, in these Q&As, there's got to be people who didn't like the film, and they have to listen to all these positive thoughts about the film. So I'm sorry, but the puppet, yeah, once so I was proposed a film by Sparks, a project, let's say, with a baby from 0 years old to 5 years old who can sing. So then the problem is casting. And anyway, I hate casting, so I thought, okay, I'm not going to go around the world looking for a newborn who can sing. And then you think, of course, because now it's in this modern age, you can do 3D imagery. I don't want that because, it's going to escape me, and it's post-production, it's not emotional. Same thing with a robot or animatronic. So I was left with the idea, what else? It can only be a puppet. And I knew nothing about puppets. And then, because we had all this time, because we couldn't find the money, I had time to look for the right puppeteer who could create Annette. And that took time. It started in America, then in Japan, then finally we found a young woman in France who was, I felt right away that she was the right person, and she could create an emotional puppet whom I could touch on the set. The actors could touch and take in their arms, and then I felt the project was saved, and it started there.
Thank you. And Leos, as you reminded the audience at a screening during the week, English is your first language, and here you are, working in an English language film for the first time. But it's not the first time, of course, that English has played a prominent role in your work. But I wondered if you know the word in its current usage. It seems to me a specifically English usage, not exclusively, the word bonkers. Do you know the word bonkers?
Well, I think I heard it for the first time on my previous film.
Yeah.
Holy Motors.
Well,
I heard it a lot.
I tell you why I ask, because a friend of mine with whom I was discussing this evening earlier had drawn attention to the fact that the word bonkers, you talked about positive responses to your films. The word bonkers is used, I think, in most of the reviews that use this word in the Anglophone press in a way that is intended to be positive, right? So that's one thing to state on the one hand. But it strikes me that the friend did a quick Google search, and the word appears an inordinate number of times in reviews. And it seems to me that, quite apart from the fact that it's an abdication, it seems, of the critic's job to rely on such a word so frequently, the profession seems to have relied on it so frequently in the Anglophone world in regard to this film. But it strikes me as completely misdirected. For me, the film does not, it's not a matter of deserving, but it's inaccurate to call it bonkers. For me, it is a work that is meticulously plotted. It operates within genres and touches on genres such as opera and stand-up comedy, as well as positioning itself within, the lineage of musical films and or musical comedy. And it just strikes me that bonkers is wrong, but not because it's a pejorative, used in a pejorative sense, which it isn't, but it just seems inaccurate. I just wondered if you had any response to this term and the sort of contagion that seems to be in the English language press with regard to the film using this word, bonkers. Have you any response?
In my mind, which nobody cares about, but in my mind, I make classical films. How I try to make, to find a classical way to express my chaos or whatever. So, I feel like I'm mainstream, and that bunkers. So, I forgot the other words. There were a few other words I heard, but I try to make I try to make simple, honest films, but then I'm aware that I play with cinema, which we should all do. I think cinema is playful, yeah.
You use the full range of the languages of cinema and of cinema history, which it seems, as you say, classical. Why not call it classical? At this point, I'd like to invite questions from the audience. I'll do my best to see the hands in the sequence. I see two in the middle row. Did I see one at the back that went up immediately? And if not, I see two here. So forgive me if someone did. I can't really see all the way to the back. If I missed someone at the back, you can tell me in honesty if you did have a hand up by showing me a hand again. So yes, in the middle, I think you went up simultaneously.
Yes. So I just wanted to ask, was there a certain scene that you particularly enjoyed watching come to life with the actors? Was there anything stand out that sort of from the script to actually seeing it performed sort of stuck with you?
I guess you start, every project starts with it's impossible, so let's do it. But then how do you do it? I would say probably the last sequence, the prison sequence, I mean, because it came late in the process, maybe because I have a daughter now, so I thought, okay, I need a young girl to respond to Henry, to confront Henry. But then I thought immediately it's impossible because you can't find that younger girl who could sing and act and confront Adam Driver. So the fact that we found her, that we did it, I think was probably satisfying.
And was there another question next to the first question?
I'd like to ask about the use of the color green, because green is really important in the film, and it was already there in Holy Motors. So I just wanted to know if there was any specific reason for that, or if it was just that you like the palette.
There's absolutely no reason, no. I made a film in Japan, a small 40-minute film, I think, 10, 12 years ago, with a character called Monsieur Merde, Mr. Shit. And I realized I had never used green in cinema in my earlier films, and I wondered why. And so I put him a green costume, and I fell in love with this green. So I painted my apartment green, and then I gave green to Adam.
And I think next was someone here at the front, near the
Hello,
front.
Thank you. Could you talk about the growing stain on Adam Driver Henry's cheek through the film that becomes bigger and in particular is quite prominent in the final scene? Thank you.
Yeah. Well, it was a discussion with the makeup artist, because I was looking for something that would be, Marion has a beauty mark here, and I was looking for something for Adam, and he told me about, and I had, in my previous film also, had a character who had I don't know how you call it in English. In French, it's tache de vin, which is like a wine mark, and English, it's birthmark, maybe. I mean, it's
Yes, birthmark.
And he told me, this makeup artist told me that when people get anxiety or terror or whatever, it can grow. So I had it, we started with a little, you can hardly see it at the beginning of the film, and it grows during the film. But also I was very, there's a short story by Nathaniel Hawthorne called The Beauty Mark, which always haunted me. So I guess the film was an occasion to use this idea of a mark on the face that eats the person alive.
Okay, because I'm uncertain about the hand at the back, but I will look again for the person that may or may not have put their hand up right at the start at the back. Otherwise, I think that here to my left is the next question.
Okay, so this is maybe more an answer looking for a question than a question looking for an answer, because Nietzsche said that we only ask those questions for which we already know the answers. So I don't want to presume there's an answer to this question. I was very moved by the presence of the puppet in the film, and not in any way that I expected. And I think it was to do with the relationship between artifice and romantic investment, and the idea of, as you said, Leos, of suspension of disbelief, And I think, you know, all of cinema and any romantic investment in cinema is about the suspension of disbelief. And it reminded me of seeing the film Lily when I was very young, and seeing Leslie Caron looking at those puppets and having this wonderful, you know, intensity of belief in those puppets in that film. And thinking about that and the idea that, you know, what it means to think about cinema as an art form, that cinema in itself is about the suspension of disbelief. So to take that a stage further, especially in the history of your own films, and think about using this puppet in a particular way and having such a, you know, romantic and material investment in this puppet seemed to me to be a very beautiful and very romantic extension of that investment in disbelief, as you say, because all of cinema is an investment in disbelief, I think. And it seemed to me to be a perfect solution to that, well, it's not a problem, but that effective world of cinema, I suppose, and to make that choice too. Yeah, I thought it was a very brave, incredibly brave and beautiful thing to do, to make that choice.
Would you like to produce the question to which this was an answer, or even respond in any other way?
Well, Annette, this film was probably, you know, really the first time I had to think of the audience before I shot the film. Usually, audiences are very abstract, and then while you edit the film, your editor tells you about, you know, people won't understand this, or it's too long, people will get bored, and etc. So you think, oh yeah, you know, what we're doing is going to be public one day. So but this time, because of these different layers of disbelief, you know, it's a musical, people sing, the baby is a puppet, etc. LA is, we film in LA, in Belgium, and Germany. So I had to think, you know, people gonna accept any of that, which is a strange thing. I mean, for me, it was strange. But then, you know, what choice did I have? Yeah, that's the gift. When Sparks gave me the project, they gave me music, they gave me English language, which was my first language, but I forgot it because I live in France. But they also gave me all these, you know, there's a baby, etc. They gave me impossible stuff to figure out, which it's a nice process because usually I imagine my own films. So I don't. Although even when I imagine my own films, I imagine impossible stuff also. But this time, I was not responsible for that. So it was kind of liberating. And the only doubt I have, which will always be there, because, you know, once again, people react to the puppet differently. So, you know, some people think it's ridiculous or creepy, or I don't know. And some people are moved by it. What I can say is that I was looking for a puppet that I can be feeling for, that the actors could have feeling for, and that the crew, we all fell in love with this puppet. So it's not a, you know, it's not a cynical move. It's this puppet is supposed to be a child, yeah.
I'm still obsessing about the phantom hand. No, it's not a phantom hand. There's one that was first, and that's the red attired person, yes? The one that's more central, yes. Yes, you. As if my finger pointing is going to work. Yes, I think you've got the microphone. And then the hand down here went up first, and then one back there is what I saw.
Do you intend to make any more musicals?
Have you got time to make more musicals? Is that
Do
it?
you want to? Is that the plan to
Intend?
make more?
Do you intend to make more musicals?
Oh, I thought you were asking about my old age. Um, well, for sure, it's going to be, if I ever make a film again, it's going to be hard to go back to spoken words, because I feel music and singing is liberating. It's much easier than directing actors talking. But yeah, if I have to, I will go back. You know, I'll always, you know, because my big regret is not I'm not a musician. That's the life I would have wanted: composer, musician, singer, whatever, a life in music. So I'll always try to approach music in a way or another. Something I haven't done. It's a musical comedy, but there's no dancing in it. I would like to try dancing, but also, you know, I could also make a small silent film tomorrow. I don't know yet.
But in terms of your own musical career, not only are you a lyricist now, you're a songwriter, but also a singer, maybe not singer-songwriter together, because of course you appeared on Hippopotamus Sparks' 2017 album, and indeed you sing a song and play the accordion on it. So for anyone who doesn't know Hippopotamus 2017, check it out. So I think what I saw, and maybe anyone who wants to contradict it, I think I saw a hand down here and one back further, and now I see another one at the back as well. Yes?
Yes. Can you hear me? Yeah. I noticed that you were saying thank you to Edgar Allan Poe in the credits. So I wanted to know why, for this film in particular, you wanted to say thank you to him, and if you've got other influence from English literature, because you mentioned Hawthorne as well.
Any other influences of English literature in the film, I suppose, and beyond?
There's a spelling mistake in his name. There's no D at the end of Edgar, I was told. The reason, as I talked earlier about Hawthorne, so I think they were neighbors, Hawthorne and Edgar Poe. But Edgar Poe gave me the idea of the last sequence. The sympathy for the abyss is, you know, it's called The Adventures of Gordon Pym, of Captain Gordon Pym, I think it's called.
Arthur Gordon Pym, is it?
Arthur Gordon, okay. I read that when I was young. And there's this amazing description of the character, I forgot his name. He's hanging on a cliff way above the void, and he knows that if he looks down, he's gonna fall. So his whole effort is not to look down, but at the same time, he wants to look down. So I took this, that's what gave me the idea of the last sequence. And that's why I thank him in the credits, yeah.
If I'm remembering, near the pillar at the back, forgive me if I've already jumbled my own coordinates, there was a question.
I loved Baby Annette, and I don't even like the idea of her being referred to as a puppet, because she was so real. And my first question is she eligible for an award, an Oscar? Has that ever happened? And can we consider that?
It's up to you whether you allow this rule breaking, Leos.
It's up to me.
When you're a French director, to quote that song from the Sparks album.
Yeah. I don't know how the Oscars work. For sure, these puppeteers, so the woman, French woman, young French puppeteers, Estelle, created Annette. Annette's face, let's say. And then she found there's a young guy also called Romuald who created her body and who worked on all the technical things. Yeah, I guess there should be something for the kid at the end, the little girl who plays Annette at the end. I saw her again. I know she's 7 years. She just turned 5 when we made the film, and now she's 7. And she asked me the same question: is there an Oscar for kids? I said, I don't make the rules. I don't know.
Okay, diagonally across from me at the back, please.
This feels like a movie full of the love of movies. What were you watching when you were trying to figure out how to make the script real?
No, I saw many films from age 16 to 24, 25 years old. From all over, from all times, from silent films to modern films. After my second film, I went with I saw less and less, and now I don't see films anymore, but I have them all here someplace. I mean, not precisely, but their power is here. I think I keep this. So anyway, I tend, sometimes I read books when I prepare a film. That happens, but I don't watch films. I read books. It can be anything on opera because I didn't know anything about opera. Or the biographies of stand-up comedian or about puppetry. But I don't watch films.
I think there was one on the front on this flank. I hope I'm not missing people on this flank. It's just that the light is shining on this eye more determinedly. Yes, microphone in the way.
Hi. So, for your fondness for Sparks and growing up with Sparks, do you feel like in making this film, having the opportunity to make a Sparks musical, that there was some, I mean, the way that I watch your films is that there's a lot of resonance in visually adapting the music, and do you feel like there was any way that from your, growing up, that there was some imagery that you thought of that you got to realize in this film? Sorry, my question wasn't vivid.
As I said, I discovered Sparks in the early 70s when I was probably 14. Right a few years after I discovered Bowie. And then I got interested into cinema, so I didn't follow so much what people were doing in music. So I know the 2 first Sparks album, and then they have like 20 albums I don't know, and then we met again like 7 years ago. I mean, we met 7 years ago. But I felt at home with their music because of these early records. But I don't. Basically, the project started with this mix of joy and poignancy. How do you say it in English? Poignancy.
Poignancy, yes.
Poignancy. That I find in their songs. They make me still today. I can't cross a bridge in a city without having a few lines from a certain song of Sparks from the 70s, or some situation where it will come back. So I took that power. I just had to be careful because their universe is pop fantasy with a lot of irony, which suits their music, but which I didn't want in my film, in the film, because irony is dangerous. I think in cinema, you have to be careful with it. It can disarm everything, or it can be tiresome. But no, I really started with their music. No imagery, no nothing. The music.
Now, there's been one final questioner, and forgive me if that wasn't you, but it was selected by the team trying to absolve myself of responsibility. We do have time for one final question. Person with the microphone.
I was told I was the last person to ask questions. I actually have 3 questions.
Okay, well, if they're quick, you can ask all
Yes,
3 and
very
there'll be
quick.
time for an answer for maybe 1, possibly.
Yeah. First one is Anne is always eating an apple. I wonder why is that? And second one is why do you think music industry has rejected you? Third one is there anyone who said you look like Jean-Michel Jarre?
I understood the third one, but not the 2 first ones, because I didn't hear the 2 first ones.
Do you like the third one?
I know the name, but
Which is the most serious of your questions? And can you repeat the most serious, please?
The first one, in the film, Anne, the character is always eating an apple, and I wonder why is that?
it's a bit like the choice or the non-choice of a puppet. So, you get into a corner where you have, and then people see metaphors, because metaphors are born from that. But she eats apples because lyrical singers eat apples. Yeah.
There you have it. That's a fact. That is unfortunately all we have time for. I mean, I'm really sorry that we can't take more questions. I'm sorry for myself that I can't ask the 10 or 12 more I'd love to ask, but would you please join me in thanking Leos for his time this evening?
Thank you.